Week 9 is here and gone, and we are officially at the halfway point of the NFL season. This week, we'll take you through all the charts and a surprising upset from Joshua Dobbs as he defeats a much-loathed Arthur Smith. This is Stat Chasing.
Pat Fryer Helmo.
This is why I'm hot.
Anita Handjob.
Fix your sight. Jamar Alpha Play Chase. Are you kidding me? Kadarius Toney?
You can't handle the heat.
It looks like we're finally at this point. You're right.
Halfway point. Feels like just yesterday that we were just kicking off the season. My best ball advance rates were near 50%, and now they're down to a piddly like 24-25% across everything. But there's hope on the horizon, Drico. We're potentially getting back Devon Achane after their bye week. Justin Jefferson is looking doubtful this week, but I'm cautiously optimistic for all those Jefferson teams that I have that were looking so promising. It feels weird that we're already halfway through the season, but how'd week 9 treat you?
Well, almost really badly because I just went to post the that we're live, and I accidentally posted the StreamYard link instead of the YouTube link. That was very quick delete.
Bunch of unexpected guests about to hop in the StreamYard.
Luckily I'm able to like add them, and that wouldn't happen, but would have been very embarrassing if we just like not that you know I have that many followers on Twitter that it would just. You'd have like 10 people, but
I was gonna say we didn't get anyone with quick trigger fingers hopping in the StreamYard queue waiting for you to add them.
Yeah, no, unfortunately not. How did week 9 go? Week 9 was fine. I rolled back a little bit in advance rate in best ball stuff. No DFS or anything like that. But it was fine. Had enough Cole Kmet, had enough what's his name, the quarterback for Texans, CJ Stroud, to kind of hold me over.
Man, I my stance this season heading in was that I really didn't want any of the rookie QBs other than Anthony Richardson, and I got so overweight Anthony Richardson in the big board when he was going undrafted in the last round. So that injury really hurt. I had a bunch of really strong 18th plus round Anthony Richardson teams that I'm watching those begin to fall by the wayside. And then the other side effect of I faded both the rookie QBs. I have like 0 Bryce Young and I think 1 or 2 CJ Stroud teams in BBM. So that's pretty painful watching CJ Stroud go out. I really want to root for the guy too. I think it was week 2. I had the CJ Stroud's going to win someone a milli maker with like a CJ Stroud mega stack, and Utica.
You call it a vomit stack.
Yeah, I mean, clearly
which was
Utica.
Brave. It was a brave call in week 2 that somebody would win with it, and then it turns out it wasn't even a vomit stack; it was just a nut stack.
Yeah, it was the nuts. I mean, Utica is clearly a fan of the show. Had to be listening all the way back to week 2. That's how he got onto that play. So. But yeah, week 9 overall was just all right for me. Was really hoping for a big Breece Hall game on the island game there. Needed him for a couple season-long spots, and just couldn't get it done. Zach Wilson is too heavy of a lead anchor, even for Breece Hall to push me over the edge there. But enough about me bemoaning my teams. Let's go ahead and dive into the charts here. Got some fun stuff to look at for this week.
So, yeah, QB passing efficiency and rushing production. We've got adjusted yards per attempt on the horizontal axis, like regular yards per attempt, but rewards touchdowns, punishes interceptions. We've got touchdown rate on the vertical axis, and then the size of the bubble corresponds to rushing yards per game. Anybody stand out to you this week? I know we really have settled in on sort of a stable chart here, but anybody standing out to you?
Yeah, I mean, CJ Stroud just is continuing to prove that he is him. Like he's moving in the direction. His play has always looked like he had a ton of potential. He's flashing. But with this, eruption performance from this week, he moves into that echelon of Tua and Purdy, the elite adjusted yards per attempt guys. He's still a little lower than them in TD rate. But yeah, I mean, Stroud looks like an awesome NFL quarterback. Super excited to watch his career. I mean, we can't not talk about Josh Dobbs, who Josh Dobbs is like, I mean, now that he's on that Vikings offense where we've got, JJ's return looks pretty inevitable, hopefully next week. It looks like this week is doubtful. But with what he adds on the ground, you can see the size of his bubble there. He's definitely a factor on the ground, and that's adding that floor and also boosting his ceiling as well. So I like Dobbs to make some noise, especially because when you consider, where he's at on the chart here, I think a big part of that was his previous situation with being on the Cardinals, which, I mean, doesn't really look like their offense has, anywhere near the caliber of weapons that the Vikings do. Trey McBride's exciting and Marquise Brown is not a slouch, but after Marquise Brown, it's kind of, that's about it. And the Vikings are definitely looking, and the Vikings are way more pass heavy than the Cardinals. So I like Dobbs as, potential undervalued QB going forward. And it's easy to root for the guy after such an awesome performance come from behind, and he gets to stick it to Arthur Smith. That was really fun.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree for sure. That was something that we talked about briefly last week, and I might have been. I was probably a little bit optimistic. I was really thinking only a small drop down from Kirk Cousins, but I think that it's very fair to see him as in the category of sort of very competent backup. The way when you have a starter go down, and sometimes the backup is like good enough to keep things flowing, that the offense doesn't crater. And then sometimes you have a backup and it's like, okay, oh shit. Like everything's gone to shit. And you almost can't start your guys. Whereas I definitely think Dobbs is in the category of you can still play Jordan Addison. We'll see what happens when Justin Jefferson comes back, but you can still play Hawkinson, and you're still going to get good scores from them. I think one thing that is relevant to this chart is that a lot of the sample that came with Dobbs being around here came for when he played for the Cardinals, and like the Cardinals offense is just so bad. Like I think Hollywood is a good player, but he's not so good that if he's your only guy that your offense is going to be good. And then the pieces after that are pretty weak too. So I think that he could be a lot closer to the mid-range here in adjusted yards per attempt, and probably closer to the mid-range and touchdown attempt touchdowns too. Like just for example, last week he came in at 6.6, so already better than he was as a Cardinal, and that's with pretty publicized, very or extreme lack of preparation, given the short notice.
I got a question for you on two quarterbacks where I kind of like the matchup for both of them this week, and they're neighbors on this chart. It's Sam Howell and Geno Smith. Can you give me your read on? I mean, Geno's been kind of a perpetual underperformer this year. Is this a get right spot for Geno? Would you prefer the Howell side of the matchup? I know the Washington defense is pretty weak against the pass, but the Seattle defense just got absolutely shellacked by the Ravens this last week. So how do you feel about those two quarterbacks? Do you have a strong preference for one over the other? And do you think that's a decent spot to potentially attack this week?
So I think, do they play? I'm assuming from your question, I haven't looked at the schedule. They play each other this week.
Correct. Yeah.
I think from a sort of like macro viewpoint that it's almost as if the fact that Geno Smith hasn't he's only had really one good year in his career, and he's been sort of backup quality. Otherwise, that and that the offense hasn't been good this year too. I think that to me that's sort of shaping up to be maybe we got a little bit too excited about this offense and this quarterback last year, and maybe he is closer to backup. And then Sam Howell is clearly, I think, really exciting when he's not getting sacked. So you really do have to. It is a pick your poison thing. I think there's warts on both of them, and I guess because Sam Howell is younger, and we don't have like the long history of him being sort of a backup, and you have the potential for a young player who's learning to kind of sort of flick a switch. That gives me sort of a slight lean to him, but I other than matchup, I think I do think you have to hold your nose a little bit on either of them. What's slightly in hell for me.
Okay. Yeah, I think Howell certainly project better this week when we get different sources releasing their projections. But I like to hear your thoughts on stuff like that to get a sentiment for like how are sharp people going to be digesting this? Is Geno Smith just going to be too yucky, full stay away? And from what you're saying, it sounds like the stench of how he's performed this season is still just a little much for you to eat. Even if you plug your nose, you still are worried you're going to smell something with Geno. And so for me, just with how juicy this matchup looks and the fact that at the trade deadline, the Commanders got rid of two of their best defensive linemen and pass rushers, I'm like, man, I kind of feel like let me just, in DFS or in, Dog Bowl, let me just use Geno as the quarterback that I'm going to attack with this week, like especially in Dog Bowl where he's not going to, I don't think he's getting drafted. I've only done like 8 so far this week, and I haven't gone over my combos super diligently yet, but I'm pretty sure he's not getting drafted at a super high clip. And for me, this just feels like, well, if they're going to let me get Geno and there's only going to be 100 other total Geno teams in the contest, I'll take a shot at that. But moving on from that specific matchup, I did want to talk about a quarterback who we are seeing ascend. He previously was in the non-desirable quadrant of the chart, towards the middle, but definitely not a guy that we were targeting or looking at as favorable. But I believe he's officially reached NBA Jam status here because his last 3 games, he was heating up. And with this last one, he's officially reached on fire status. And that's Dak Prescott. And it's kind of meshing with the resurgence of CeeDee Lamb just being an absolute target hog, like looking like one of the true target hogs in the league. And so I'm wondering, do you think that what we've seen from Dak is more indicative of this is what the Cowboys look like when they're in closer games, or what are we seeing here? Is this closer to the norm for Dak, or is he going to regress back a little bit from these last couple of weeks? What are your thoughts there?
So obviously he's on a hot streak. He is having a hot stretch. I think that he is sort of a pocket passer in that a lot of his when he has the big games, it's going to be through the year. And game to game, that's going to be volatile. We've obviously had the last 2 to 3 weeks have been very, very good. And I think that's obviously encouraging. You want to see your players play well. But I think it is good to keep in mind that the profile there is a little bit volatile, and it would be quite shocking if you didn't have down games as well, just because sometimes they don't get the touchdowns, or sometimes they have a bad day. So, I guess that's a little bit wishy-washy, in that I'm like acknowledging how well he's played and saying, oh, sometimes he's gonna play bad, and sort of like that's my sort of like long-term view of like how, like 1,000-foot view on how I'd see Dak. And then what I would also say is that with the pocket passers, you do want to make sure that you're very price controlled. You don't want to be. I would still see him as a non-elite pocket passer. He's good. He's very good. He's definitely in a very good category. So with that said, would want to be price conscious, but it's been very obviously good to see him put up the points the last couple of weeks.
And I think that's a really good point. When you talk about being price conscious on these pocket passers, if you look at where Justin Herbert falls on the chart and what you had to pay for him in best ball drafts this offseason, just, doesn't make a ton of sense. Like, give me Jared Goff. It's same shit.
Right.
5 rounds cheaper, right? Another
it's
one.
Like 95% Dak almost.
Another one here is Pat Mahomes. Is that really like a second round kind of like? I think and this is, I know there's people are going to be mad that I'm saying, oh, you can't take Pat Mahomes in the second round. I just think it's so wildly different than Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, the quarterbacks with that elite rushing floor ceiling combo, because really what that does, and God, this season has been, I mean, if you get tired of me typing the same shit in Discord over and over and trying to like explain quarterback pricing and what's reasonable and what should be driving the market, get ready to get annoyed again, because I'm going to say the exact same shit that I've said a million times before. But this season is playing out and like just painting the exact picture of my thesis and my reasoning here. And it's these quarterbacks that don't have major downside deviation, like Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen. When they have bad games, like, number one, they're pretty few and far between, and number two, they're still like at 20 fantasy points because Jalen Hurts got tush pushed into the end zone, you know? And then
or
when
60
you get
yards rushing or something like that.
And even a quarterback like Tua, who I was, flag planting all offseason as this guy is egregiously mispriced. This is the worst priced player in the entire draft landscape. I was hugely overweight on him. But the difference between those pocket passing quarterbacks and the quarterbacks with that rushing upside, or just the absolutely elite quarterbacks that just don't have down games, which, I mean, Mahomes was the only one that I would have argued, avoided that downside deviation. But this season, with the awful weapons that they've got for him, and, if Travis Kelce has a bad game, it's like, all right, well, Mahomes is having a down game now. But like, look at Tua's game log, look at Mahomes' game log, look at these pocket passers. And when they have a bad game, they're getting you 10 points or 13 points or something. And it's like, okay, that's enough of a deviation from what an average quarterback's going to score on the week to the downside that it's hurting you. And so you really, in my opinion, and the way that I look at the game, like, you don't want to be exactly what you're saying. You don't want to be paying a premium for these guys that can do things at a relatively decent clip where it's going to hurt you on a given week. And so for me, that's why it's like, hey, it's Allen, Hurts, and then a big tier break. And that's one thing that the market doesn't get correct, is they get panicked on the scarcity of the position. And they're like, oh, I got to grab the next best tier of quarterbacks. It's like, no, it should really be a large tier. Like, it should be like those 2 elite quarterbacks and then all the best skill position guys until we get through that tier, and then quarterbacks like maybe in the 4th round or something. But anyway, that's enough rambling.
Price consciousness, especially with pocket passes, is very important. Because like the prior year, Mahomes was sort of bouncing around, depending on your draft, between round 4 and 6, and the ones where I got him in round 5 and 6, like insanely good pick. because you were getting those upside games, and then you got them at a price where it separated you enough, and then the downs. Then also in this, because your price was lower, the downside didn't hurt you as much.
100%. Yeah, very well said. And you said it in like 2 minutes less than it took me to say it, which is why I am happy to have you basically breaking my thoughts down and making them much more actionable. A quarterback that I wanted to get into, there's actually two that I looked at this week that I thought were interesting. One is a guy that I've talked about every single week, it seems like. And he was my most owned quarterback in the Dog Bowl this week at 35%. That was Lamar Jackson. I was basically taking him if Alvin Kamara was off the board because of his just absurd expected fantasy points profile. I would take Alvin Kamara at 101, but after he was gone, I was taking Lamar 102. And I feel like, I mean, if you look at where Lamar's at with his TD rate, he's just running kind of bad on touchdown variance, right? Like this week, the Ravens had 4 touchdowns and Lamar had 0 of them, right? And I think last week they had 5 and he had 1 or something. Like he's just running a little bad on touchdowns. And like, I know some of that is going to be systemic, especially it really depends on the matchup for them, right? Like if it's a game where they need to put it all on the line to win, I think you're more likely to get those Lamar goal line type of carries and plays where they're willing to put him out there a little bit more, put him at a little more risk. Or when they face a stouter run defense on the goal line where, you know, Gus Edwards can't just rumble in there for, break 2 arm tackles.
One of the things about last week was that the Lamar Jackson in particular was like a victim of success, in that the offense was rolling, and obviously he's the biggest part of that, and defense dominating. So they go up big, and then Lamar Jackson, he only had 26 attempts last week. That was his third lowest of the season, and so in those sorts of games where one team just dominates and then takes sort of foot off the gas, you really need when they go up big, you need that player to get the touchdowns, to get when they take the lead. Otherwise, it's sort of over. And but I guess that's just 1 week. I think the general sort of theme is he is playing very well. He's operating an offense at a really high level, and that anytime you can get a discount on him, he's just a smash.
So here's a question for you, because for me, listening to what you're saying, it sounds like you really want Lamar to either get priced down in DFS or for there to be so many other elite options on the slate that his ownership gets depressed, or in a Dog Bowl like a type draft, you're looking at
right.
Hey, people.
I mean, I don't think specifically for Lamar, but I think he's a great example of a player who can get that just because of some outcomes he's had where he hasn't played that well. Like is a good example of somebody who's playing extremely well, extremely efficiently, and may get priced down or may get lower ownership because of poor fantasy outcomes or below what you're expecting.
And so I guess my big question is for this week, for the matchup against the Browns. Now, a lot of people would say, oh, the Browns have, one of the best, if not the best defense in the league. That's going to really stifle him. Do you think it could potentially be a situation where the Browns, stay in the game with the Ravens, and are they going to be able to do enough on offense to potentially push the Ravens? Because I feel like, and this is going to be very narrative based. I could go back and look at the data on this, but I haven't yet. I probably will now that I've brought this point up for myself, make a little mental note. But I feel like in those games where it's the Ravens are really, it's a tight game, Lamar goes Superman mode at a higher frequency in those ones than not, where he's just,
it makes sense.
I'm going to rush for 100 yards,
But in downs where let's say they're up by 3 scores and he's just throwing the ball away, but if it's a close game and they got to have the third down, then he's taken off or something like that. That I think that totally makes sense. But the what you're describing now is, so he's playing the Browns, and people have a lot of respect for the Browns defense this year, where they played some really good offenses, really tough, and someone's like, "Oh no, you can't play high-priced Lamar against the Browns defense," and then he goes under ownership. But Lamar is an elite NFL and fantasy player, and so you never fade the elites because of matchup. You just don't do it. And if you get an ownership discount because of that, you try to take advantage, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was leaning into as well, but I definitely wanted to get your thoughts on it here before I just go smashing Lamar again. His neighbor on this chart, new quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons, Taylor Heinicke. I'm curious what you think about Heinicke, because there have been games in the past when he was on Washington where we saw him. He had some games where he was willing to sling it. There were lots of games from him also that were pretty ugly when he was on Washington. So I'm wondering, is this a spot where you're willing to take like a super cheap quarterback dart throw here? Is this just I don't want to be part of this? How do you feel about Heinicke?
I don't know if it's cool. I'm having a really hard time playing Falcons. Just it's so hard for me to play a player on an offense where they're just like they're doing random number generator for who gets the ball, and it's the scheme, and the scheme is player agnostic, and they have all these great players and they don't want to get them the ball. That it could honestly truly be a thing where I'm letting narrative or emotion cloud my judgment. But I really do have a tough time playing players in that offense right now. Just because it's gotten past the point of being like weird. Like last year, you had situations where the offense was trash, but you could say, "Oh, but it's so concentrated on these two guys, and they're the best players on the team, so that sort of makes sense." And now it's the offense is fine, like on an NFL level, it's probably subpar, but not absolutely awful. Maybe a little worse than just subpar, but like not pure trash. But at the same time, they just have all these weird usage trends, and it hasn't just been a 1 week blip. It's been multiple weeks with multiple players, and just not making any sense. So, that's where I'm sort of landing, but that could be wrong.
Yeah, that's the hard part for me too, because if it was just he's using the, like we talk about the assumption of rational coaching, where, if you're going in and you're making this assumption that the coach is going to do the thing that you think the coach should be doing,
right,
based on the, who the best players are, who they should be getting the ball to, how they should be calling plays to win the game. Well, that's going to work if the coach is rational, but if the coach is not acting rationally, you're going to have a bad time. And Arthur Smith, like you're saying, is going well beyond irrational. Like, it's not, he's talking about how Tyler Algier is one of the best short yardage backs in the league, when like he either is intentionally trolling people or he has not actually looked at any of the data. He's not saying anything that's backed up by data. It's like, yeah, this guy feels really good at short yardage stuff. I don't know why, but I just like him, and so then I guess my angle is, well, can I go inside the mind of an Arthur Smith? Like, if I hit my head really hard, like I'm not even speaking coherent sentences anymore, could I potentially pick out usage trends from the Falcons if I give myself enough of a head injury. And so that's kind of the way that I'm looking at playing the Falcons. Like, I just head injure myself, and then I construct my Falcon stacks. And so that's how I'm looking to play my Heinicke this week.
So just you're just saying, like, you know what? Screw it. Heinicke and Jonnu Smith and Tyler Algier, let it rip.
Could be, but I'm going to hit my head hard enough that sometimes I click Bijan and sometimes I click Pitts, and shit, there might even be like a Van Jefferson in there. Like, I mean,
this sounds like very much large field lottery sort of
for sure
play in DFS
for sure. But
okay, but that is what you're talking about right now.
Yeah, and they do get the Cardinals, who, I mean, couldn't you see, like, I don't know. I kind of feel like it might be a spot where everyone's mad at Arthur Smith, and the game, Kyler's back, so they're able to actually push the Falcons. And it's not consistent that Arthur Smith passes when they're in situations that require them to pass, but there have been times this season when he's passed, when he's been required to pass. And so it's like, maybe, just maybe, Kyler does enough, and then the Falcons have a, somewhat functional day on offense against a pretty bad Cardinals defense. And there's points in places where it's too yucky for most people to want to delve. And I'm willing to be the guy dumpster diving for the correct Falcons pieces. I don't know. It's probably a great way to burn money.
It definitely sounds like low ownership, large field, and if there's like a chalky running back or something that you want to play, that's how you play them.
Yeah, I don't have any more quarterbacks I want to go over unless you have someone.
No. I think we covered it. We're ready to move on. And I'm just to clarify my comment. Whereas, like, I sort of agree with you in that, like, there will be weeks where the Falcons put up decent points, and you'll want the guys that points go to. It's like, it's one of those things where it's random usage across the offense, and then the spike week isn't that actually high, so you really do want how do I say it? If you're going to be that, it seems like a really true contrarian play. You want to be smart with how you do it.
That makes sense.
But yeah, let's move on to and I will zoom out to our first running back chart, and the RB snaps and usage. These are starter players, everybody who runs a route or has a rush attempt on 40% or above on their offense's snaps. And you can see that in the green bar, that's rush attempts as a percentage of team snaps. And then yellow bar is routes as a percentage of team snaps. And obviously, the idea is you want the running backs that are on the field consistently. And this doesn't sort of speak to efficiency or anything like that, but it gives you an idea of, hey, who's out there, who has the potential to earn points, and particularly with routes and the main thing with getting check down passes for running backs is just that they're out on the field. So that's why we focus on that. And then we have pass block and run block stuff there just as to sort of complete the picture. But we really are focused on sort of fantasy productive snaps.
So I just like last week when I talked about the tight end usage chart, really starting to, crystallize in tiers and really clearly show players in these tiers that we want to think of them in. I feel like the running back chart is doing that this week, and it's making, really good, clear tier breakdowns. And so I wanted to point out a couple of them. So, like, you have Christian McCaffrey, who's the elite, like, insane usage and also just so productive. Obviously didn't have a game this week, so he's not going to move the needle there. But then you've got this next group that's like Rachaad White, Saquon Barkley, who's the group of guys that are getting just a ton of work. Like Kyron Williams probably falls into this category when he comes back. Elite roles, great amount of work, but not in a great offense, or maybe themselves as a player, they're not like an elite talent at running back. And so they're just like, yeah, there's the volume there, but they're not going to be the kind of guys to put up a legendary season. We did see Rashad get there this week, just on the back of volume and a couple, goal line carries that he was able to convert. But that's kind of that tier of high usage guys, but lacking the talent or the situation to really be elite. Then you've got the guys that are still getting similar levels of work in like ETN, Eckler, and Jacobs. But I would say of that group, ETN is this feels weird to say like Eckler doesn't have as much juice anymore, but just from watching the Island game against the Jets, and again, it's just one game, but to me, Eckler looked like not the same Austin. I'm not saying he's bad by any means. Like, you'd still love to have him on your fantasy teams, but I think we want to be careful with assigning him the same level of crazy efficiency that he's been able to get in the past. And so like ETN, Eckler, Jacobs in that tier, I'm wanting ETN over both of those other guys because ETN looks like he has juice, and the other two are just like, yeah, great role, good talented players, but just maybe not quite as much juice as ETN. And so I'd rather have the guy with the juice. Do you feel like that's a fair assessment of that tier?
Yeah, I think clear. It seems clear to me anyway that a large part of Eckler's lack of efficiency is he did have a high ankle sprain, and those do take time to come back, and he is older, so the recovery time is dragging on there. I think that it's still possible that Eckler is a guy like who really helps you in the playoffs. Obviously, he has to really help you, given his first round price tag, but definitely. If you're playing him, you're definitely taking on pretty well-established risk now. And I think that's going to be pretty clear to most people, especially, as you said, he played in the Island game where his limitations were on display. But current athletic limitations were on display. But I agree with you. Travis Etienne, he's definitely the one that you want there out of that grouping.
And so here's a little Dog Bowl alpha, and you can veto this if you don't think that this is the way that
I have no right to veto you on Dog Bowl alpha.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing about fantasy football, right? It's the results from one slate determine if you are good or not at the game.
Yeah,
and
true. If you have one slate,
I won one time, guys, so I'm pretty much the best to ever do it. No, what I was gonna say is, Eckler's going as the second running back off the board in the Dog Bowl right now. It's Christian McCaffrey, pretty much 101 every single time. Then you got the tier of like stud receivers of like Chase, who I think is going too high given how bad that back injury looked. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he's limited this week. And CeeDee Lamb and Keenan Allen. And then you've got Eckler going with ETN going, like he's still in the first round, but it's Eckler at the beginning of the first and ETN at the back of the first. I've been just flipping that and taking ETN. Basically, I'm taking ETN like third off the board because I'm doing CMC 101, Lamb 102, ETN 103. And that's kind of how I think it should shake out. And I think that's enough of like, I think it's enough of an edge to be like, yeah, give me at price. I'll take 0 Austin Eckler this week. I'll take all the ETN you can feed me this week.
I think this makes sense. Where I was thinking, okay, there's pretty clearly risk here. And it sounds like that risk is just not priced. It's not reflected in Eckler's price. And so thus the Eckler price doesn't make any sense. I did have a little smile when I saw that, when I heard, oh yeah, and CeeDee Lamb is my 102.
I swear to God, it's not homerism. I like full transparency. I basically full faded Lamb last week against the Eagles because I thought the price that he was going at, I'd rather just say that I know that a huge game like he had was squarely in the range of outcomes, but thinking about it probabilistically, I'm like, all I got to do is fade this big CeeDee Lamb game. Even a good game, I'm probably safe as long as I get the Lamar game that I think he could have that would break the slate compared to all the other quarterbacks last week. And so I was 35% Lamar and no CeeDee because it was always a question of, hey, Lamar can gap the quarterbacks harder than CeeDee can gap the wide receivers. And so I swear I'm not doing the CeeDee homer thing. I'm only doing it when I think that it's the correct pick. But moving on, here's
I
some
will say that receiver. I'm obviously teasing, but just in the context where you're talking about, receivers pretty light this week in the Dog Bowl, which is
100%.
Where that makes sense. And then, like you said, Ja'Marr Chase had the back injury, so just that was some ribbing, but it does seem appropriate.
Well, let me make sure that I firmly have to revoke myself of my Cowboys fan club card because I'm about to say some not nice things about Tony Pollard from a fantasy perspective. Love Tony Pollard, the player and the man. But in this next tier of guys, you got Joe Mixon, DeAndre Swift, Tony Pollard. And I think Alvin Kamara is slightly different than these. Kamara is more in that Eckler, Jacobs, ETN tier just because of the crazy expected fantasy points from the receiving side. And so I think he's more in that, hey, Kamara is Josh Jacobs, basically. They're both like, Kamara's even a little more dusty than Jacobs in the rushing game. Jacobs just looks like he didn't care. He was like, I'm not running hard for Josh McDaniels, this chuckle fuck. And then now that they got the interim head coach, he's like, I'm down. I'm down for the cause for at least 1 week. I'm gonna put the body back on the line. And so I think Kamara's kind of in that group. But then you get Joe Mixon, DeAndre Swift, Tony Pollard. And the unfortunate truth of the matter is that Tony Pollard is fancy Joe Mixon right now. And it pains me to say it, but that's what it looks like, man. And the roles for both are good. It's just for both of them, the efficiency hasn't been great. Pollard hasn't converted like any touchdowns. He got totally robbed of a touchdown this week where, for all intents and purposes, it was a touchdown. It was a super ticky-tack call where apparently the lineman didn't report as eligible, but Dak told the ref
the longer term, or sorry, like the longer game sample of him not being able to convert touchdowns is there. Yeah, and then you have the things like his rush yards over expected have been negative, and like just general signs of him not playing up to his prior self.
Yeah, so I do think that he's kind of fancy Joe Mixon right now, and so again, it's kind of like the conversation that we had with respect to pocket passing quarterbacks. For these running backs that aren't displaying that elite efficiency and are below that absolute best usage tier, I think you got to be price sensitive, right? Like, for example, you could take Pollard in the second round of the Dog Bowl, or you could get Joe Mixon in the third, and even sometimes slides to the fourth. And so it's like, I just have to take Joe Mixon there. I don't think it makes a ton of sense to pay a premium when I'm just trying to buy. I'm trying to buy the usage and the fact that the guy could fall into the end zone. And I don't think the probabilities are so different for both of those guys that the price difference is justified. So
is Rashad and the Bucks are on the main slate. So I'm almost going one step further. As like, isn't Rashad White the same?
Yeah. In my projections that I have for the really early drafts that I've been doing so far, Rashad White is pretty much always bubbling up as the best running back pick available after the second round. And the way that I play stuff like that is, I've talked about this. I won't rehash this, but I've talked about the rare coin toy game that I use for drafting to kind of think through when are you supposed to take the best player in your rankings relative to when are you supposed to take the best player at ADP. And so for Rashad White, I try to earlier in my drafting, I'm trying to see how far can I get him to go? Mm-hmm. Give me an idea of where does the buck stop on Rashad White? And then once I've got that and I've got a pretty good idea of it, then I'm going to start grabbing my Rashad White a little before that point because I want a lot of him based on his price is wrong. And so I want a lot, but I want to try and milk as much as I can get out of him, especially if there's other guys going around him where it's like, gee, I could potentially get George Kittle plus Rachaad White, both of whom are looking like two of the best projected players at that point in the draft for me, with the points above replacement that they provide. And it's like, so I could take Rachaad White, but I'm probably losing Kittle then by the time my next pick gets around. So let me take Kittle here, and I'll see if I can get Rachaad White to come back. But yes, great call out. Rachaad White is definitely, he's right there with, Mixon and Pollard as far as the points above replacement that they bring.
But it goes to a general point of like, hey, if you can accurately profile a player, which Pollard, hey, great role, not playing very well. You want the cheap versions of that profile. Yeah, absolutely. And then to kind of put a bow on the last group of guys that I think was just really showed up clearly in a tier here. The Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, and Jonathan Taylor, where these guys are not, and Taylor's usage improved pretty substantially this week, and Breece's usage is trending up. Walker's usage has been trending in the opposite direction. I don't think that's super sticky. I think it's just kind of, Pete Carroll discovered his shiny toy of Zach Charbonnet and he likes him, and they're trying to feel it out right now. So I think that we'll still see Walker with a pretty good role, but just like Breece and kind of just like Jonathan Taylor, all three of them are home run hitting types of backs. Now they all have different flavors, going along with that piece of their profile, where all three of them can deliver you a week winning single play where it's, hey, 80-yard touchdown, breakaway run. They've all got that in their bag of tricks. Taylor is extremely involved in the passing game now, and so that looks really promising, but he's got Moss eating into some of that. Moss might take some goal line carries or take more work than you want. Breece is still losing passing down work and long down and distance work to Michael Carter, where it's like, God, we know that this guy is an elite receiving back. And so it's frustrating to see him not get all of that. But so he's kind of like Jonathan Taylor light in his receiving role, but he's still getting opportunities in the passing game. And then you get Walker, who's not really getting much at all in the way of the receiving game in these recent weeks, where he was a little earlier in the season, but he still has that big home run profile. And Breece has had low success rate kind of with Kenneth Walker this season. And I'm not certain if that's, coming back from the injury or if it's just the Jets offense and offensive line have been bad. And so that's negatively impacting his success rate. But anyway, do you kind of agree with that assessment of that tier of running backs, and how do they stack up to Joe Mixon and Fancy Joe Mixon tier? How do you compare those? So I think I agree with you 100% on Michael Carter, Breece Hall. I see that Breece Hall, he had like 13.7 expected points last game. I know that that's for another chart, but just to sort of frame it a little bit. And then you see that Michael Carter, he had 9 expected receiving points. So even with we're theoretically through the ACL injury, we're getting full Breece usage. And right now, Michael Carter is still stubborn, sort of like holding on to some of the role. And I think you like you said, it's a similar situation, maybe different flavor with JT, where JT had 75% of the snaps last week, but Zach Moss still sort of like, they still like him, they still want to use him. With those two players, I think, I should say, with Breece Hall and Jonathan Taylor, I still think you're talking about like true elite difference maker running backs. And that I sort of see it as like, hey, I don't know what will happen next week, but I think that it's almost, barring injury, it's inevitable that they separate themselves. And so I'm still sort of in the mode of like, I want to be able to take advantage of that when it happens. Like, I'm gonna play it before I see it. But that's sort of how I would see that. And then Kenneth Walker. So I'm looking at some of the news stuff for him. That he has like apparently a oh no, I'm seeing the wrong thing. He has an injury that has been sort of holding him back. It's like a calf injury that he hasn't been practiced with. And I know he got removed from injury report before playing the game, but I do wonder if that's still holding him back, because like you said, I truly don't see an efficient split between him and Charbonnet as 50-50. I don't think that makes any sense if they're both healthy. But I guess the more weeks you see that split, the more you sort of have to pay attention to it, and the more worried you get about it. So that's how I would see all those various situations.
Okay. Those were really I felt like just going through those tiers of these, the top running backs by usage was the most important takeaway for me when I was looking at the chart this week. Quick honorable mentions, and then we can hit the next chart. Aaron Jones he's going to be moving on up. It looks like he's finally healthy, got a lot of opportunity this week. I think he was 20 carries. So that's a spot where I think the offense has been bad enough. And if the Packers care to win any games, like, they can't have Jordan Love be responsible for very many pass attempts. So I think it's just going to be, if it's a game that's winnable for the Packers, I would fully expect there to be a healthy dose of Aaron Jones. And so that's what we got against the Rams this week, where it's like, we can win a game. There's an NFL game that we are, squarely in contention to win. So the way that I want to play Aaron Jones going forward is I need the Packers to be decent favorites in it. And I'd hope that they're against a team that is still going to score some points on them, but I want the Packers to be favorites. And then I'm looking to play some Aaron Jones in that situation. Otherwise, if the Packers are big underdogs or anything like that, even though Aaron Jones could be utilized in the passing game, for me, it's just like, I don't think the Packers would care to utilize him a ton in a game where they're getting the break speed off of him. It'll just be whatever. We hate AJ Dillon. He's not the future for us. You can go out there and get this meaningless punishment. We'll save Aaron Jones for a game we can win. But that's kind of my quick 2 cents on Aaron Jones before we move on to the next chart.
Okay. I guess my question would be, so what about this week where they're playing at the Steelers? And so they're on the road, but the team they're playing is hardly elite. But they are favored favored by 3.5 points. So like, definitely the favorite, clear favorite, but it's not like they're like wide. They're expected to like run roughshod over them. How does that mean that you play Jones?
Yeah, for me, that seems like a clear Aaron Jones is on the menu type of spot, but not a Aaron Jones is locked into everything I'm playing on the week, right? If that makes sense.
Yep. Very fair. So now we're looking at the same chart, but these are the backups. And I guess I should mention that these are 4-week averages. So we're not looking at the full year, just because with this sort of running back usage, the trend is much more important than the full year average. We don't really care about week 1 anymore, sort of.
Yep. Very, very well said. Tyler Algier, with almost no snaps, still manages to make Bijan drafters so sad. It's just that Arthur Smith thing where he just finds a way to be unpredictable in the usage of his players. I think these are the cover boys, and we've got to go over this situation because the offense has produced so much. But it's Justice Hill, Gus Edwards, and new exciting addition of Keaton Mitchell to that Ravens 3-headed monster backfield now. So for people who aren't super familiar with Keaton Mitchell, he was a 0 RB candidate that I know Sean Siegel was excited about during the offseason, but he's a small guy, extreme burner. What did he test? He was like a 4.3 speed kind of guy. He's really small. He's like only 170 pounds, maybe, like sopping wet. So definitely
4.37.
4.37. I mean, so yeah, the dude can fly. And if you want some fun college highlights, go watch some Keaton Mitchell college highlights because he looks pretty electric. The
192 pounds, 5'6".
Okay. So yeah, he's a little guy. But the bad news for Justice Hill is that Keaton Mitchell kind of looks like a Justice Hill type replacement, right? He's just the younger, newer model who's never torn his Achilles. Now, there are a couple interesting points with the usage for this week. Number one, it was a blowout game. Game got out of hand, and the Ravens really were just trying to salt it away. So Justice Hill dominated the snaps, and they kind of put Gus Edwards on ice, which to me, the signal to take from this is that Gus Edwards is their most trusted running back. That's the running back they value the highest and want to, keep fresh. And so when the game got out of hand, they were happy to bring Justice Hill in to help salt it away. But Gus Edwards was important enough to this team that he needs to go on ice. So some people might look at the usage and say, oh, well, Justice Hill had the most snaps. And for me, this was a pretty negative sign for Justice Hill. Not like he's totally, totally dead, but when you add Keaton Mitchell in there, where it's like, this is a guy who's flashing the efficiency and big plays that we were hoping to get from Justice Hill. It's just, to me, it kind of spells disaster for all three of these guys as far as like being able to predict who you actually want to start going forward. If I'm having to decipher it, I'm saying if I'm going to take a guy like for DFS or Dog Bowl, I'm pretty much only doing Gus Edwards. Keaton Mitchell's usage has been so sparse, and he only got run after the game was out of hand. So I don't really know. For me, you mentioned, for some guys like Breece and JT, you want to play it before you see it, right? For me, Keaton Mitchell is not a play it before you see it spot, because it's like, I think it happening is so unlikely that I don't feel like I'm getting one over on the field by like just locking in Keaton Mitchell every week until it happens. I don't know. Am I being too risk averse there? How do you feel about the way this?
No, I think that's pretty fair. Out? That's pretty fair. Where, what it is not like, it's not worth burning like American dollars for. It's like that's good currency. You should use it for something else. Like, the sort of play it before you see it is something where it's like, if it doesn't happen, you get upset, but at least that, like, if it did happen, which is their best outcome, that you win all the money. Whereas, like, you're playing Keaton Mitchell, and oh wow, he actually did get 10 carries again, and oh, instead of 2 routes, he ran 5 routes. It's like, who fucking cares? So yeah, I strongly agree.
Okay, so
strongly
so
agree.
In summary, no American dollars on Keaton Mitchell, but if you do have some Venezuelan dollars that you weren't able to get out from under before the currency totally collapsed, you would maybe consider chucking a couple Venezuelan bucks on some Keaton Mitchell teams.
Yeah, well. Just to keep it in the realm of usability, would not play him. Would not play him even if I was so inclined to pay like the free contest on DraftKings. Wouldn't consider him worthy of a play.
Thank you for getting us back on track there. There's only one other spot I had interest in discussing on this backup RB chart, and that's the Bears backfield as we potentially get Khalil Herbert back. And so you've got a really murky situation now where Deonta Foreman has, in my opinion, and just based on the usage, it looks like he's done enough that the Bears are like, oh yeah, we like this guy. And so he's just going to get some of those grinder type touches. The way I kind of see this going forward, because I thought Roschon, if he was going to be able to capture more opportunity, would have done it, in these weeks without Khalil Herbert. Now, granted, he missed some time with the concussion and maybe he, slow getting work back in. But you've got Darrington Evans still, if Roschon was going to win more opportunity, he'd be icing out Darrington Evans is the way that I read it. And so since you got Darrington Evans still getting touches, the way I look at it is Roschon's probably close to droppable. In like a shallow league, he's probably droppable. I don't know. You might hold on to him with a wing and a prayer that he still surges late for the playoffs. But if you got any better option to churn onto your roster, I think you're dropping Roschon. And then going forward, are you playing either of these Bears backs? Like if they're super cheap or undrafted? No, it's too gross. It's too many mouths.
It's too many mouths with too small a pie. So I can see, I'm just looking just at last week. Donta Foreman, he had 55% of the snaps, which and obviously a lot of those are rushing attempts, and he does well with those. But at the same time, you look at the expected points for running backs last week for the entire offense, or not the entire offense, for every running back, it's just 17. So, unless you have a situation, I guess maybe there is one situation where that, or you expect the Bears to be heavy favorites, and the week where Donta went off, if you sort of if you're expected, or if you want to play for a week like that, then it's worth maybe taking him on if he's gone undrafted a lot. But I think that's the only scenario, and you need him to be undrafted, and you need to be at least somewhat confident that the Bears will be convincing winners and be able to be able to just run it 20, 25 times with him.
Yeah, I agree with you there. That makes a ton of sense to me. If there's no one else that we want to go over on the backup running backs chart, let's go ahead and get into the running back efficiency chart.
And so, this is our running back expected points and efficiency. And so horizontal axis, we've got rushing expected points, and then vertical axis, it's receiving expected points. And then size of the bubble 2 corresponds to efficiency. And you can also see that Gus Edwards here, most of his expected points is on the ground game. And he actually has played quite well overall with strong efficiency. I sort of had highlighted him last week as an example of maybe just seeing this as high efficiency means playing well is not quite correct. Where it's a model that says, hey, given his usage, how many yards would we expect him to get? How many did he get? And the difference is the error term. And if the error term is positive, that means they played well. So I guess I'm just going to correct myself that there have definitely been situations where Gus Edwards has had big, huge plays. And I know, for example, the one where he was down the sideline and they got chased down by the defensive tackle. That would be one where it's a really high fantasy points over expected play. But did he particularly play well? Probably not. But at this point, given the usage, it may not matter for usage as he is clearly the preferred back for them. But I guess the only thing that I would say there is that maybe you don't expect those plays to continue. You probably will get some more typical Gus Edwards type plays in going forward, rather than the sort of lucky 40-yard sprints.
I just want to see Ravens games where they're down multiple scores and they just actually have success passing. I just want to see that. But on topic, let's one of the running backs I wanted to point out here, because I think that the opportunity that's available there is certainly enticing. So you see Alexander Mattison, he's right on that, about 15 expected fantasy point per game type role. Cam Akers tears his other Achilles. Gosh, that guy cannot
Feel
catch
awful.
a break. Yeah, poor guy. But Mattison now has a pretty good situation where
he's in the Joe Mixon Pollard sort of tier that we're talking about.
100%. He's even less efficient, Joe Mixon, Pollard, that Rashad White, all that.
Oh God,
group of guys.
Imagine Joe Mixon, but even less efficient.
It's not sexy. But here's another thing: you got Josh Dobbs there now, and you've got what I've heard referred to as the Alfred Morris corollary, which is when you've got a rushing quarterback, they can make even the dustiest, shittiest running back look a little bit more efficient because, hey, you got a rushing quarterback. The defense has to respect that, and it can open things up a little bit more for the running back. So the way that I'm playing this and the way I think this is actionable is Ty Chandler becomes a really appealing stash because, he's the next man up. He should be the backup to Mattison, should be getting worked in. Hopefully you see him get, at least the kind of opportunity and snaps that Akers was getting so they get a look at him. And you're just hoping that the talent there is enough that they say, oh, we should give this guy more run. And then the other way that I'm willing to play this is if I ever get like a bargain basement Mattison and they're in a situation where they're either against a really weak run defense or they're huge favorites. So I could see Mattison just falling into the end zone a couple times. Now that the role is more consolidated, unless Ty Chandler does manage to, take a little bit more of it, I'm more interested in him as an actual potential viable fantasy play. What do you think?
You like that Mattison at running back 20 in the Dog Bowl?
Gosh, who are they playing? New Orleans.
New Orleans, yeah. And so that's right around there. He's 36 on the dot is his ADP. So
yeah, I haven't seen him drafted in any of the rooms that I've done. That's probably worth a mix in, honestly. Like you just no pun intended. But yeah, taking Alexander Mattison as my undrafted Joe Mixon, I don't hate it.
He's going on the random number generator list.
He is. He will. The guy that I had been doing in that last round that wasn't getting, he got drafted in like basically 50% of the rooms I've been in is Jerome Ford, where it's like, wait, what? Jerome Ford, who got like 25 touches last week, is going undrafted? Like, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. Right. Sure, he's going against the Ravens defense, who is good, but like 25 touches is 25 touches, man. Like, just
right.
Let's see other backs worth mentioning here. Aaron Jones we touched on already. I didn't have a ton of takeaways here from this chart. Is there anyone that pops out to you?
James Cook coming in the less than 10 expected points per game seems like an interesting sort of like evolution where he's only on the field now for 55% of snaps. He has had his efficient games, but you, especially with like the 5th and 6th round that he was going in at the end of draft season, like I think he seems now to be a pretty clear example of like a silent killer where you get games from him, but he is hurting you from winning titles.
Absolutely. I've got a little Bills running back hypothesis here that I'll be interested to see if it plays out this way. So the last couple weeks, they basically said like, what's a running back? They kind of like phased that position out entirely of their offensive game plan. Like, you guys only exist for, out of absolute bare necessity, really. Like they seem to not want to put the ball in either Latavius Murray or James Cook's hands if they can avoid it. Now, we've seen this in the past when Singletary was still on the Bills, where you get into the cold weather months, and every once in a while you get like this stretch of 2 or 3 Devin Singletary games where he's getting like 23 carries and falls into the end zone a couple times. It's like, oh my gosh, big Devin Singletary spike week. They brought in Leonard Fournette, who looking thick as hell in the best way, looking thick in all the right places. If you've seen the short shorts,
he's been using the last couple of months to work out rather than eat out.
Yes,
which is what I've been doing.
Now, my hypothesis is the Bills do. I mean, Sean McDermott is kind of the like. He's got the vibe of like the rah, we're going to run the ball down their throat in the cold weather type of, like, and we've seen that happen enough where I feel like that's not just narrative. It's like, no, he wants to do that. When it's cold out, he actually really values that power run game. And so I'm kind of thinking we might get like the first game that Fournette is active. If it's like a bad weather game, I might just lean all the way into it and just be like, fuck it. Let me play all the unowned Leonard Fournette this week. Let me just lean into it and hope I get Lenny falling in the end zone twice, because he's capable in the passing game too. Like, he absolutely could take that passing game work from Murray and cut James Cook out of a bunch of passing work as well. And like, they're clearly not thrilled with what they've got at running back. Otherwise, they'd use them more. So I don't know. Do you think that's is the Bills backfield more of like the Bears type, just stay away, there's not enough there, or do you think there's anything to my cold weather hypothesis here?
I think it's probably it's a bit like the Bears backfield. I think the offense is obviously better, but then at the same time, running backs are less emphasized in the offense. So like the amount of available points around the expected points in the offense is still it's pretty low. And the other thing that I have noticed about the Bills is that they don't want to be featuring just one guy. They want to be spreading the ball around. The only reason I don't know, the other running backs in years past must have pissed them off, or they love Singletary that much that like by the end they're like, okay, yes, Singletary, you can be the bell cow, but I don't think they ever wanted to do that, and I'd have a hard time seeing Leonard Fournette being the guy that convinces them otherwise, and he did it for Tampa Bay, so he could become that guy, but that is definitely a situation where if it does happen, if a running back does emerge as a bell cow, I'm okay seeing that first before I like commit to it almost, if that makes sense. Because I think even if somebody is like the bell cow for the Bills, I don't think they're going to project that well, because they're not going to be like a full like 100% snap person, and the available expected points isn't that high anyway. So even when you see it, it's probably not going to be that expensive anyway, I don't think.
Well, thank you for talking me out of being the engineer on the steam engine, Leonard Fournette, where we fuel the fires of the steam engine with American dollars. I won't be doing that. But when he goes off in that first week in that cold weather game, and I didn't have a bunch of Leonard Fournette teams, I'm going to blame you. I will hold you fully responsible, Drico.
That's true. And I know you'll understand this point well, whereas when you talk somebody out of something and you're right, you'll never get credit, but when you're wrong, they will remember it forever.
Hunter, that's just the way the game is played.
So anybody else here? I'm ready to move on.
Yeah, let's hop to the next one. And so for this one, there was this guy moved a little in the positive direction, and his bubble size trended in the positive direction. And I'm talking about Rhamondre Stevenson here, as he's approaching that 15 fantasy points expected per game threshold. But to me, so much of that was on that one breakaway run where he was trying to do his best Gus Edwards impression of getting caught from behind. You know, like, I think on my best day, I might be able to have got him from behind on that run. You know, I'm feeling good. Like, no aches or pains, like really juiced up. I get some smelling salts in me before, and, you know, I'm not wearing pads or anything to weigh me down. I might be able to get him from behind on that run, because he did not look his most spry or the most explosive. Just Rhamondre in general this season really looks like he lost a step or something from what we saw last season. I don't know what it was. I mean, he did hit like a little gear of acceleration when he stopped having to like round a corner around a defender and he could go straight line. He hit like a next little gear of acceleration, but his top speed didn't look great, you know? And so to me, this Rhamondre Stevenson movement in a positive direction is more like fool's gold than anything. Here's a question: Jerome Ford or Rhamondre Stevenson, straight up, who do you want? You know, rest of the season, you got to start him every week.
Probably slight. It would be, yeah, Jerome Ford. It would be, and not even slightly in, because I'm just looking at their sort of snap share. They've got similar snap shares, but my big problem with Rhamondre is that offense absolutely stinks. It's a stinker offense. And, you know, the Browns have shown that they can have competent days, whereas I don't think that's really true for the Patriots. Like, even if I had, like, I think that within the micro bubble of Rhamondre, that you are getting positive signs where he is getting the 2/3 sort of snap level. And it is nice to see a good play from him. But in the context of, like, the offense stinks, and you still have questions and concerns over whether he's still, like, whether he's lost a step or I'm not even confident enough to say that he's lost a step, but you've got concerns. And with all that in the pie, like, Jerome Ford is preferred. How do you see it?
No, that's the same way that I feel as well. It's just the offense is too bad. Man, I thought, and I mean, I was kind of attacking the uncertainty in that offense of, like, where the projectable volume would go this last week. So I got to a decent amount of Rhamondre. I didn't do a lot of the Pop Douglas stuff. I didn't think that
seemed bad.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Especially like in the Dog Bowl where he was going 100% drafted. And I did click Juju one time, but not often, but it's like, shit, just give me Rhamondre, give me Hunter Henry, give me, like, I didn't think that Pop Douglas was the way that you want to play that when he gets, you know, he's going to be drafted in every single draft there. And then same with DFS, he got, you know, pretty steamy, like in high stakes, small field stuff. Pop Douglas was like 40+% owned, which is just, that's absurd. You know, that doesn't make any sense. There were lots of low dollar wide receiver plays you could have plugged in. Right. That I like a whole lot better than 40% Pop Douglas on a non-functional New England offense. So,
right. And like, just Rhamondre, I think the role is good. You've got concerns over his quality right now and the offense. Yeah. Sorry, I probably said that already, but
no. That's okay. I mean, this guy had a bye, ETN, but like, he still just pops and stands out as like, this is why I'm like, yeah, ETN's my running back too this week. You know, when you get a guy, so like the difference between the ETN efficiency and the like his size of his bubble compared to the Gus Edwards size of his bubble, like, think about the plays that is making Gus Edwards' bubble inflate, and it's like, he converted a touchdown where he was like expected to get half the points because half the time he gets in and half the time he doesn't. And he took an 80-yard little dump off pass and got caught from behind. It's like, those aren't plays where I'm like, what a crazy talented running back. This guy's a game breaker. It's like, no, the dude fell in the end zone because the offense is super efficient and he got a fluky little pass. Where on the flip side, when ETN is inflating his bubble size, it's like, dude just house one from 50 yards on a breakaway run, or like he's like getting chunk plays and, you know, just consistently getting more than what's blocked. Like, yeah, so that's the difference. And that's why it's important to have context with this data and not just look at the size of the bubble and go, big bubble man, good. Me take big bubble man. So anyway,
boys against just taking big bubble man.
Yeah. Another big bubble man on this chart is Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm really curious to see how this David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs split shakes out. And to me, I got a read on this. This is more of like this is the qualitative side of the analysis and not the quantitative. But I got to tell you, Dan Campbell Dan Campbell is a far superior coach to Arthur Smith, before I put out any blasphemy. But Dan Campbell has Arthur Smith vibes. Right? There are some things that Dan Campbell does where you're like, man, I'd love to see more Jahmyr Gibbs, but you just gave David Montgomery 30 freaking touches, you know, or man, it sure looks like Jameson Williams is winning every single route when he's on the field. Yeah, he's got some drop issues, but like, dude, have you ever considered maybe we just need to get this guy more, you know, real NFL game opportunities and try and just get him in the flow of the game? You know, like you see some of the best coaches do stuff like that. When you've got a guy who's like, for example, this one always sticks in my head is like why Andy Reid is such a good coach, man. Like I think back to the very first touch of Kareem Hunt's career, and everyone is so gassed up on Kareem Hunt, his rookie season. Like he was the late round drafted running back darling, where everyone is so hyped on him. First touch, fumble. If that was like Bill Belichick, or I mean, I don't think Dan Campbell does it, but maybe, you know, Arthur Smith, you fumble on your first touch, you know, enjoy riding the pine for like 6 weeks minimum, right? But what did Andy Reid do? I can't
trust you.
The very next drive, he goes out and he gave Hunt opportunities, and he ended up with a huge breakaway touchdown run. And that was the start of that big Kareem Hunt season with the Chiefs. And so to me, I kind of see the Gibbs Montgomery situation, and I think about how Dan Campbell treats his players and his personnel. And again, like I don't want to besmirch Dan Campbell's good name. I think he's a really good coach. But there's just like this little bit of the Arthur Smithian flavor to him where I'm like, man, I kind of feel like we're going to see Gibbs banished to the shadow realm and have like a DeAndre Swift type of disappearing act when he was on the Lions, where we're just all so frustrated and we can't believe that David Montgomery is doing this and icing Gibbs out again. Do you think those are reasonable concerns? How are you treating this backfield and playing it going forward?
So Montgomery's practicing. Don't know if he's playing this week. Definitely seems liable to play this week. And I think that when they've both been active, Montgomery's been the one that gets a nod. And we had the situation before where Montgomery missed a game, Gibbs got true bell cow type usage, and then Montgomery comes back and he's the bell cow again. So the usage that we've seen from Gibbs is probably not indicative of, that's a bit of a weak way to put it. It's definitely not indicative of what he looks like with Montgomery comes back. And I would caution against seeing it as a true 50-50 once Montgomery comes back. They really like Montgomery, and they truly, like they've said it, we prefer to see Gibbs as the change of pace guy with Montgomery as the bell cow. And so I guess there is some like probability, like there is some range where Montgomery comes back and they're like, okay, we like what we've seen from Gibbs, and we're happy for this to be a 50-50 split now rather than the way it was before. But just in the vein of being price sensitive, I see that his ADP is 13 on Underdog, and it's like that is like not that doesn't seem to be pricing that risk properly at all. Where like you've got a player practicing, and that could just like completely like take away his expected points, and that maybe that's a little bit risk adverse because I guess it maybe there's some chance that he still plays 50-50 and plays really well, but my base case is definitely if Montgomery is back, Gibbs is sort of like tanked again. He's nuked.
I fully agree with you, and yeah, I've been kind of feeling out, like I mentioned, with how I was doing Rachaad White. Like, let me see where Rachaad White goes, how far I can get him to fall, and then let me pounce on that and fill the bags up. And I did that with Montgomery. The market's definitely like keen to Montgomery. They're not letting him slide very much. He's like beginning of the third round, or like, I'm trying to remember if I saw him go like end of second, but somewhere in that range. But definitely like it probably should be flipped, right? Like Montgomery should probably be going like 15 and Gibbs should be going like 30, but right now they're not correct. So I thought that was a good spot to bring up there.
Yeah, agree for sure. And I think we can move on from this one, right?
Yep. Let's get into tight ends here.
And so tight end utilization and efficiency. And so this is just what percentage of team dropbacks where is the tight end either running a route or blocking. And obviously we want routes. We don't want blocking. But good to see who's on the field almost all the time, even if they're not running a route all the time. And George Kittle, normally the sort of like the darling for using blocks because he's almost always playing pretty close to 100% of snaps, even if his route rate isn't what you'd like. His route rate is normally always really high anyway. But with the injuries that the 49ers have had, he's obviously been leading all tight ends in route percentage of team dropbacks. And his blocking has come in, whereas I guess you've got David Njoku, who is playing pretty close to 90% of team dropbacks, but he's blocking a lot, so his routes are not ideal. I guess this is another one where it's sort of kind of stabilized, with maybe a couple of exceptions. Who stands out to you?
I mean, we kind of did the tight end tier breakdown crystallization on last week's episode. So if you missed that, definitely go back and give that a listen. I feel like that was a good breakdown of the tight end landscape. For me, the guy that the market sentiment, the like public perception of this guy isn't correct. And it's Evan Engram. Now, granted, his ADOT is like, minuscule, but he's getting 20. Think about this, man. How hyped is everyone for Dalton Kincaid now, right? 18% targets per route run, 4.4 ADOT. Evan Engram is the same ADOT basically with 22% targets per route run. Everyone is like doing cartwheels over themselves for like, oh my gosh, Dalton Kincaid with knocks out. It's so exciting. It's like, yeah, I mean, Evan Engram has had target competition the whole season from, Ridley and Kirk, and he's still getting that 22% targets per route run. So I feel like he is being overlooked by the market for what he is. And the game that they had, obviously they were on bye this last week, but the game that they had against Pittsburgh, it was a rainy game, so a lot of shorter passing in that. But also I had heard a kind of a good analysis that I jived with, and I thought it fit for that game, that Pittsburgh was able to pressure the passer and get there, had a pretty good pass rush win rate, was able to get to the passer quickly. And so you could look at the Jags to potentially use Engram with his low ADOT as a way to attack and counter that, quick pass rush. And that really played out. You had 11 catches for Engram in that game. And I really, truly think that is, and another tight end that follows that similar profile is Dallas Goedert. The Eagles did the same thing when they were getting, pressured quickly, utilizing Goddard on those, quick little dump offs or screens to kind of beat that pass rush. And so I think understanding the archetype of the tight end and like how their bread is buttered, where the team likes to use them, like what, the ADOT is part of it. But another part is like in what circumstances are they really getting those targets? And then trying to play that matchup game and identifying spots where you can take advantage of that and have higher confidence. So for me, Jags against 49ers, where, I know that the 49ers pass rush has been a little underwhelming lately, but I think coming off the bye with the amount of talent they have in their, front seven, I could definitely see this be a spot where you see the 49ers pass rush get right. And by extension, then you see this be an Evan Engram game out of necessity. So that was one that stood out to me for this week. Cole Kmet also kind of flashing. He's delivering spike weeks at, a high enough frequency. Quarterback play doesn't matter. Quarterback play be damned. Cole Kmet has decided he just wants to get there every once in a while. So those were the two that right away stood out to me. Did you have anybody that's popping for you?
Yeah, and do like Cole Kmet there, where he's clearly in the starters. He's clearly a good target earner, so he's running lots of routes, getting lots of targets. I guess it's he's been there every week and sort of ignored, where Cade Otton with this like elite route running, his targets per route run is like not ideal at only 14%. Like that's definitely not ideal. But if you're using a sort of like Dalton Kincaid comp, it doesn't seem like it's not that much worse than Dalton Kincaid, and he's also going pretty undrafted. In if that's like a measure for for enthusiasm for him. Where it's like, that's definitely the profile of a late round tight end that gets there, where they're just running an absurd amount of routes. And even if they're not like an elite talent, like the opportunity is there for them to get some points.
Yeah, Cade Otton, definitely a good call out. And yeah, like you said, the role hasn't changed. He's been doing this all season. It's just last week he found himself in a really good game environment where it just went crazy and he happened to get 2 of the touchdowns. So he's not a guy I'm super excited about week over week, but you could certainly do worse, right? And little shout out to Jay Fresh. We were talking this last week about the slate, and he had said he was going to play some Baker and Cade Otton and Rachaad White stacks. And I looked at my dog bowl exposures. I had 0 Cade Otton, and I was like, I'll click Cade Otton once or twice just to sweat with the boy. And of course, I mean, you couldn't have done much better than Cade Otton. I mean, other than having the CJ Stroud side of the game, but man, the Cade Otton, Rachaad White, Baker stack was pretty nice. So shout out to him for getting me onto the Cade Otton. I just wish I had more.
Jay Fresh, obviously very sharp. I know that Dallas Goedert, he broke his forearm. So RIP, probably going on IR. Hopefully we get him back sooner rather than later. But disappointing news for sure.
And I believe you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong on this. If I remember right, last year against the Cowboys, Dallas Goedert also had an injury that landed him on IR. I want to say it was a collarbone last year or some shoulder, perhaps.
I don't remember, but I'm not gonna sweat it.
Weird fluky thing that plays the Cowboys, ends up on IR 2 seasons in a row. That play where he got tackled too, I saw the stiff arm go out that he put out there, and then he's getting pulled down by that arm. And before he even hit the ground, I was like, oh, this could be bad. Like he's going to get full body weight of the defender on his, I thought it might be I thought we were going to see his elbow just full on explode. He got fortunate that it was the forearm instead, which I'm sure is much less severe. type of injury, but it looked bad from the get-go on that. Other tight ends here worth mentioning, kind of like in the lowest of keys, interested in Juwan Johnson. It's the hard part for the Saints is there's just a lot of guys that they're involving in the offense. Like you've got, I mean, this last week you got Michael Thomas get bricked, just total goose egg. But Thomas has been involved. Olave is getting a lot of targets. Shaheed is pretty much good for like minimum three a week. Taysom Hill is just doing Taysom Hill things. Kamara is super involved in the passing game. And now Juwan has been involved. I think he got 5 targets this week. And so it's like, man, if the offense was a little bit more condensed and, maybe one of the receivers was getting less or Kamara was getting less, I'd be even more interested in Juwan because last season he flashed some upside and Card, I mean, I know Taysom threw the touchdown pass in this week, but he seems like a Derek Carr type of target. But I don't know, just a guy, I mean, probably not even worth like a pickup or anything like that. You're not playing him, but it's just one that I had a note on where I'm like, let me pay attention to Juwan Johnson at least and see, just because he's been out from injury for a while. I want to see how it shakes out for him. So
makes sense. Something to look at for going forward.
Same with Chigo Okonkwo. Same kind of thing where with Juwan he wasn't involved because of injury. With Chig, he wasn't really involved because they didn't have any type of functional passing game. Did get a couple targets from Levis. I'm kind of curious. Right now for these first 2 Levis games, it seemed like Levis figured out that he could throw the ball to DeAndre Hopkins and that guy's really good. And he's like, I'm gonna do that. That seems like a good idea. But I wonder if as he gets a little more comfortable in the offense and defenses realize that they should probably try and deny the DeAndre Hopkins safety blanket from Will Levis, maybe you get a little bit of Chig in there. Maybe the offense is just more functional. And so he's potentially exciting, but he's on the fringe of like the starter, top 12 tight ends there with good enough targets per route run, good enough ADOT where it's a guy that I'm willing to look at some weeks.
Makes sense. So this is the same chart, but for backups, and nothing stands out to me here. What about you?
Pretty much nothing. Yeah, I mean, Taysom Hill is really like a quick, just super high level overview. The Chargers tight end situation is like pretty much virtually unusable because you got Gerald Everett and Donald Parham eating into each other's work, and it's just not something you could really do for fantasy outside of like a showdown slate. And even then, like Parham and Everett both were priced up on the showdown slate to a place where I didn't love playing either of them. The guy that is the most interesting and the most fantasy relevant here is Taysom Hill. And that's, he's not even it's not that he's doing it from tight end. He's doing it as a running back. He's doing it as a quarterback. He's doing it as a receiver. So obviously Taysom Hill, super exciting, great single week ceiling. The thing that the way it's run out this season, he looks like probably one of the best tight end picks at cost. Like, do you think that's fair to say just with what we know his ceiling is? And like, he's been delivering usable games at a way higher frequency than I think anyone would have anticipated. Yeah.
Clearly great pick on underdog. Clearly great pick. I agree for 100%.
At FFPC, obviously, I mean, even before the quarterback change, nowhere near as good of a pick because the tight end premium hurts Taysom. It doesn't help him, right? And same with DraftKings where it's full PPR. Now, granted, he has been getting some receiving work, but so much of Taysom's value comes in that he's getting like, these goal line type packages for him.
It's not from
touchdowns. Yeah.
It's touchdowns and maybe the odd breakaway run or something like that.
Yep. But yeah, just I think everyone knows Taysom is fantasy relevant. We don't have to spend a lot of time on him there.
Do note that Stone Smart who we see on the chart, he's also a Charger.
Yeah.
So we have a third hat in the ring there to really muck things up.
I forgot to include Stone Smart, but yes, yeah, just making that Chargers tight end room totally unusable. So,
and so on to receivers, and here we have weighted targets per out run, which is like normal targets per out run, but rewards targets down the field more than sort of targets close to the line of scrimmage. And then fantasy points per game is on the vertical axis, and then the color of the bubble represents what their route share is. So red, the 95 to 100, yellow is 90 to 95, and green is 85 to 90. And so we sort of try to look at this chart in 4 quadrants. The top right that's your sort of just pure stud, playing real well, getting lots of opportunities, scoring lots of points. We love it. Bottom right is positive regression candidates, where getting lots of opportunity, maybe not scoring lots of fantasy points. Sometimes that's because of a bad player or a subpar player getting lots of opportunity. But sometimes it's also speaks to somebody who he could have a positive regression. Top left is your sort of prime regression candidates, players who are scoring lots of points, but not necessarily dominating targets down the field. Now, sometimes that player is getting lots of short yardage targets and doing quite well with them, or getting so many of them that with a PPR that it does push their points up. But a lot of the time, it's just guys who caught a touchdown, and they can't catch a touchdown every week. And then the bottom left, we've got the milk carton section, where they're just running cardio, they're doing routes, they're just out there having fun, but they're not getting targeted, they're not scoring points. Sort of very forgettable fantasy performances.
Yeah, in the milk carton section, guys that I'm like making a mental note on is like, this player's dead for fantasy. Like, do not draft at any price. And I'm usually not a like, don't draft a guy at any price type of person. I'll take anyone at the right price, but like, these guys just are not producing. I don't see them producing. Like, there's enough evidence that it's like, I'm good, I don't need it. But Alec Pierce, Darnell Mooney, I see no reason to ever draft either of these players for any reason where you're trying to win. Like, if you were doing it for a meme or something, like, you could for sure take those guys, but like, don't need them. You know, that's right. Not for fantasy points. You know, they're just entirely unusable. Like, Alec Pierce had all the opportunity in the world this week. It was like, you know, Josh Downs is injured. Like, it's full runway clear for him, and like, he can't do a damn thing. So yeah, not interested in that player at all. On the positive side of things, you're seeing CeeDee Lamb finally make good on my promise that he was going to be moving up and to the right. He is migrating into that tier of, you know, the best receivers for fantasy. You're seeing Jacoby Myers come back down to earth a little bit. He was very hot, and I'm thinking that a big part of that was the familiarity of Jacoby with the McDaniels system, alongside his quarterback having familiarity with that system, and both of them being able to execute on that. I don't really know that Jacoby with AOC is going to be able to, even if, let's just say, AOC is much better than Jimmy Garoppolo, which I don't even think is asking a ton. I don't know that you're going to get the kind of production that we saw from Jacoby early in the season. I think that he's closer to where he'll truly be. Another guy who's regressing from what we saw earlier in the season is Adam Thielen is finally starting to catch a little bit of that negative regression. He's stopped, scoring touchdowns every single week, stopped catching 10 passes every single week. And he's still going to get targeted. But what was wild to me was this week, the Panthers just threw the ball to a bunch of like nameless tight ends. It's just like a bunch of random tight ends getting passes. So to me, it was just like what Adam Thielen is doing is so replaceable in the offense. It's like literally anyone who is able to operate within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, Bryce Young will throw the ball to. He doesn't really care. It's just like, are you within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage and you're the first person that I can see over the head of an offensive lineman? And he can't see many things over the head of an offensive lineman. So it's really just, blind luck if you are in that lane that he can actually see you open. So I definitely expect the trend of the Adam Thielen negative regression to continue. Noting that one. I'm a little curious about the Chris Godwin. He's put up a pretty poor performance this last week. Wondering, do you see any kind of bounce back being possible for Chris Godwin, or is he just kind of like he is what he is at this point in this offense? How do you view him going forward?
So, sorry, give me a second. Where is he in? I'm just trying to find him in. Godwin's right in the middle. He's right in the middle, where he's in the section where he is and I'm just understanding his usage. He is getting targeted, but he has a pretty low ADOT, and he's scoring 11-ish, 12-ish points a game, and a large part of that is just sort of like it's Baker Mayfield, not Tom Brady. So that I mean, to say that it is what it is, I'm really reluctant to sort of discount Chris Godwin for the rest of the year, just given that we know he can be so good. But at the same time, it's also like, well, if he's a low ADOT player in a Baker Mayfield offense, and there's other viable targets where it's just not going to absolutely concentrate on him, it does feel hard to call for like a significant increase in fantasy production for the rest of the year. That's sort of how I'm seeing it.
Can I hit you with a couple quick 1v1s and you tell me just real rapid fire who you prefer? So let's go. Yeah. Chris Godwin or Tyler Lockett rest of the season?
Ooh. Probably still Godwin.
Okay. Chris Godwin or Terry McLaurin rest of the season?
Yeah, still Godwin.
Chris Godwin or Zay Flowers rest of the season?
Zay Flowers. Yeah, that feels pretty comfortable in that, hey, better offense. He's a rookie, which gives you more confidence in the second half of the year, even though he's already playing very well. But
let's take a quick Zay Flowers pit stop then, because he's had a couple of quieter games here. You think is he kind of the victim of circumstance the same way that Lamar has been, where it's just
that seems pretty fair to me. That seems pretty fair to me, where the pass attempts have been down when they in large part just because they've built huge leads, or you've had they've built huge leads, so they haven't had to pass it. And I guess you do have the problem as well, is that they want to get other players involved too. That has been a problem, but I guess I'm if players in the first half of the year are going to be roughly neck and neck in terms of points, I'm always going to prefer the rookie for the second half.
That's fair.
Is how I see it. But you definitely have some stumbling blocks there where they really want to get Odell Beckham involved. They really want to. They have been trying to get Rashad Bateman more involved, and then Mark Andrews. He's obviously the clear alpha too. So that definitely not like the clearest path there, but given that they really like Zay Flowers, and he has played well so far, that does make me think, like, if I'm trying to find a true breakout, which is the main thing that matters, I'm trying to find somebody who can score 15 to 20 points every week. feel the best about him achieving that.
That's a very good point. Yeah, we don't think Chris Godwin's going to be putting up 15 to 20 a week, but we could definitely leave a light on for Zay there. Last comparison here, Chris Godwin or Michael Pittman rest of the season?
Ooh, I just have like such an anti-Michael Pittman bias. It probably should be Pittman, right?
But they're really similar, honestly. Like they both are, they're both kind of low ADOT, you know.
Mm-hmm. That's such a tough one for me.
I think the biggest difference is that Pittman is the clear one in his offense, and Godwin is the clear two.
Yeah,
I think that one is close. Definitely wanted to get your stance on it.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time deciding. Whereas, I guess, like the offense for Indianapolis for Pittman is it's helpful, right? They play no huddle. It's not Anthony Richardson anymore. It's Gardner Minshew, who is that I would see in the competent sort of backup where he keeps everything else in the offense going, but he's not going to carry anything either. And Pittman is the clear sort of one. He's not having to fight through. He's not having to fight through players quite the same way Zay Flowers is. But at the same time, like Zay Flowers he is the better talent. Yeah, I think that truly is just a tough gut call. Like I think you do have more upside with Zay Flowers, but that's on the absolute top end of like, hey, what are the best outcomes for Zay Flowers? Definitely look better than the best outcomes for Pittman, but in probably like most of the normal scenarios, Pittman probably does a bit better.
I had one last receiver on this chart I wanted to talk about. I know we're trying to keep ourselves under 2 hours here. I think we can do it, so I'm going to be brief on this guy. But Marquise Brown, I mean, he's in the quadrant of the chart that we like. He's getting good weighted targets per route run, about to get a huge quarterback upgrade, provided that you think that Kyler is, gonna be healthy and be able to, deliver quality passes to Marquise Brown. But like I'm seeing in the Dog Bowl, every time I'm like at the point where Marquise Brown would be appropriate for where I've got him projected for this week, he's like off the board. I feel like everyone and their mom is ahead of this trend, and they're like, "Oh, Kyler's back, Marquise to the moon." And so I just don't know, how do you feel about it? I mean, I think they're right to expect a jump here, but maybe the market's getting out over its skis a little bit, and just trying to be everyone's trying to be first to the punch here and predict the big Hollywood blow up game. But what do you think about him with Kyler coming back?
So it's definitely helpful, but at the same time, he is his biggest and biggest positive and negative is that he is going to have to operate as the clear number one target in the offense. So he's gonna get the deep targets, he's gonna get the short targets. He's just gonna heavily targeted, and the offense has to sort of run through him. But at the same time, that's not really a skill set. He's best as like a sort of like deep threat receiver who can do other stuff, but best used as mostly a deep threat receiver. So does Kyler coming back help that? That definitely, I mean, much more than Clayton Tune. But in the context of Kyler has had the ACL injury, and he's coming off of that. How much does he help him more than Dobbs? Like, I don't want to say none at all, but it's got to be small given that he's coming off the tear, right? And Dobbs is sort of like played solid too. Like I don't want to see I actually I'm not looking for a huge jump here. Just maybe like a small bump.
So you think the market might be out over their skis a little bit on the inflated Hollywood prices?
Yeah, where are you seeing him go?
I feel like I've seen him like early, middle, third round. Like he consistently goes before Nico Collins, which is bananas to me.
Right. Where Nico Collins, obviously much better offense, and has been operating as the number one there. Even if it didn't quite show up last week, but definitely understand that for sure. Like why he should go, Hollywood should go after Nico. Who else has he been going around?
Let me pull it up and look here. Because I feel like he's consistently going ahead of ADP too.
Right. I'm looking at the Nico ADP, or not Nico ADP, the Hollywood ADP of 34.9. But based on what you're saying, that's probably not quite clear. But,
yeah, no, it's he's certainly going before that. So I'm looking at the main slate now. Like he's usually going in my drafts. Yeah, before Nico, like right around Cooper, before Cooper, like around a little after Debo. There's like a chunk of running backs that usually
got it. So not terribly priced up.
But for example, would you take Hollywood over Christian Kirk, or would you take Hollywood over Jordan Addison? Or
no.
Yeah, and those guys are always available after him.
Right.
Same with Ridley. Deontay's another one. Like Deontay has an ADP higher than him. I think I got like a couple different 5th round Deontay teams. It's like, what's going on here? Why is this guy available in the 5th? We have Hollywood going in the 3rd. Doesn't make a ton of sense.
Right. Doesn't make any sense.
All right, let's move on to our next wide receiver chart here.
Not sure if we have any sort of like I do. Tank Dell has been in the last chart the last couple of weeks. Now he's in the real boy chart.
He graduated. Yes. And when you see that next chart, you're gonna realize how disgusting that chart is now that Tank Dell has graduated, because it's pretty bleak.
I guess the only thing that I'm seeing to talk about here is Jaxon Smith-Njigba, where
I wanted to ask you about him this week. You think he's a viable play this week against that Washington pass defense?
I mean, I think if you're playing Geno Smith and JSN is going undrafted, then it that seems pretty viable to me. But it's also like I know you're not I'm not terribly confident that you should be just like smashing JSN over like Tyler Lockett, for example. Like I still think that Tyler Lockett should go ahead of, and maybe only slightly ahead of JSN. But we've gotten a couple of weeks now where like the underlying trends have been better. Like he still had a 91% route share. He's still got, even if they were garbage time, he still got something like 6 targets, despite the really small low play count. So I definitely think the pathway is there for like a big smash JSN game. So would not shy away from playing him at all in sort of dog bowl stuff, and would consider starting him in redraft or managed, where you don't have any kind of options that you're confident in. He would be a good sort of like plug and play, I think.
Yeah, fully agree. I have he's gone undrafted in some of the rooms I'm in. He's drafted in most, but usually a last round pick. I did get sniped on a JSN team one time, but yeah, definitely a guy that I'm interested in.
I don't think that, for example, I don't think DK Metcalf should be going at pick 20 and then lock it and JSN.
Exactly. Yeah, 100% agree there. Here's one that I am interested in this, and this is going back to my disgusting Taylor Heinicke play that you tried to talk me out of. But Drake London looks like the kind of receiver I should be pretty happy to play, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that he missed last week with the groin injury, but I think he got like a couple limited practices in at the end of last week, I want to say. I think he got like 1 or 2. Still missed. So I don't think it was super serious. Sounds like he could be back this week. Am I crazy if I, like, in the dog bowl, I'm never gonna do a Taylor Heinicke. I don't think. I'd have to hit my head really hard. But like, I could do some Drake London. Maybe you think Drake London is a reasonable pick here? I don't think he gets. Let's pull up the London ADP. But how do you feel about London?
So you like his usage stuff hasn't been like messed around as much as other players. So like, if I take out the last game, which I'm thinking had an injury, he has had a 90% route share. So nothing sort of funky going on there. His targets per run has still been pretty good. So just an average of 21%. So definitely not like elite by any means. If I take out week 1, it's closer to 23%. So definitely not elite per route target stuff. Far from it. And that's sort of reflected in this chart. So, but on the other hand, we know that when you have the big Drake London game, it should be a pretty big game, but it's definitely super thin. But he has a ceiling, so and you shouldn't ignore that.
I'm gonna read you some of his people that are right next to him in wide receiver ADP for the Dog Bowl this week. And you just real quick tell me if you preferred London or the other player. Quentin Johnston.
Yeah, it's London.
Shaheed.
I mean, it is London, but it's also sort of close, I think, which is more an indictment of London than
an endorsement.
It is a small encouragement for Shaheed, but more an indictment for London.
Godwin.
I think that is sort of that might actually be Godwin.
OBJ.
Yeah, London.
JSN.
So JSN or London, and probably JSN.
That's how I feel too. I mean, the rest of these, I'm not even gonna like waste your time with, but it's like Brandon Cooks, Michael Thomas, Christian.
Right. You're getting in the true gross range.
Yeah.
Where
here's one
it's
where
mostly undrafted Drake London. If you and only a handful of your buddies have him and he goes off, you separate. That's the play, right?
Yep. And I'm asking you to save me some money this week. We can go. Is there anyone else on this chart that you had that you wanted to talk about?
Oh.
Okay. So yeah, let's go to the next one.
Okay. So you're right. You're already there.
Yeah. So here's a gross one. Can I play Jamison Williams in the Dog Bowl? Am I allowed? Could I do like a Jared Goff, Jamison Williams thing?
Who was it that they signed again? Didn't they sign somebody that everyone was like, oh no, you can't play Jamison Williams anymore?
Oh, DPJ. Yeah, DPJ is going to take all my Jamison Williams work, right?
I mean, my first reaction to that was like whenever like you're cheering that a player was traded off an offense because they got iced out, and like it's not because they had frustrations or whatever, like or like with the team playing badly. It's just like this guy wasn't getting the opportunities anymore, so they had to trade him out. Like that's not a good sign for a player. And then not the strongest college profile. So for DPJ. So I think that you can be reasonably confident that DPJ is not good. But then you can also be a little bit concerned that like, oh hey, why did they trade for him?
For me, it's more the and I just noticed a guy that I need to axe off this chart. It's more the Marvin Jones departure. They just want depth at the receiver position was my read on the DPJ trade. But yeah, I think Jamison Williams is probably not someone that I should be clicking in the dog bowl unless I'm really keen on lighting $25 on fire. But who knows? Sometimes I might just get that itch.
Right.
On this,
I mean, I know you have to scroll the F down thing, but that one, like you're saying, that one might be too Galbrain.
It feels a little Galbrain to me. This chart's disgusting. There's like, I had a couple receivers on this chart I was interested in, but then, Daniel Jones tore his ACL, and now Tommy DeVito's chucking him the ball, and so like. Jalen Hyatt, Wan'Dale Robinson, both were interesting to me. I mean, they're just probably toast for this season, which is a bummer. I really like both of those players. Honestly, like Daniel Jones didn't look great. I wasn't like, oh, when Danny Dimes gets back, then it's on for Jalen Hyatt, right? Like I felt better about Tyrod Taylor in there. So I got a question for you for looking all the way to next season. It's next summer. We're drafting best ball teams, and the Giants tell us Daniel Jones is going to be ready for week 1. Daniel Jones is the franchise quarterback going forward. He's going to be ready week 1. He probably won't be, but like just hypothetically for this. Are you interested in drafting Wan'Dale Robinson or Jalen Hyatt if Daniel Jones is the quarterback for that team?
I think I'm still interested in Wan'Dale. Just because it's obviously been a couple of like sort of like mini lost seasons for him, but at this point, still feel good enough about his talent, and the fact that he will be an 18th or later round pick next year, and at that price, still I think he'll still be pretty viable.
That's fair. Yeah, I guess for me, it really depends on what their backup quarterback situation is, because I doubt you actually get Danny Dimes to start the season. And I do like Wan'Dale, the player. So yeah, if we're getting 18th round Wan'Dale, I guess I'm still in. So for me, the reason this chart is so gross is because there's just like no one, like even as like coming on as a potential late season breakout, it's just, maybe Zay Jones gets healthy and comes back and can deliver some spike weeks. Maybe the Chiefs decide that Rashee Rice deserves more snaps. I mean, maybe Curtis Samuel gets healthy and has a couple more usable weeks. But like when those are the bright spots on the chart, like I think.
Right. Yeah. We're a little late in the season for any more true graduates. I'm still holding a light out for Rashee Rice, and still think he's played well enough to graduate. But
he looks good. It's just the Chiefs got to be willing to put him on the field. I think they're getting to the point where they almost don't have a choice, right? Like you have to, like if they're, I think maybe going into their bye. Hopefully they do a little self-scouting of their wide receiver room, and they're like, this Mecole Hardman shit, like we were ready to be done with it, and then we brought the guy back because the Jets just
pretty indicative that they need help.
Yeah, you gotta think that Rice earns more snaps. I don't know. I that's the one I'm most excited for on this chart. But anyway,
agree for sure.
Yeah, don't need to spend too much more time here.
I just want to bring up one comment that I feel guilty about missing is Andrew said Dotson has had stacked some nice games. Are you viewing it as a sell window? And the pretty clear answer for me is yes. Like his his underlying usage with sort of like 18 to 20% targets per run, and then somewhere like his ADOT hasn't been that high either, and then he's happened to catch the touchdown. So to me, that sort of suggests that like he has scored some points, but the underlying usage is still not supporting where you got him and where you drafted him. So like I said, it's always price conscious, but definitely feels like a sell window for Dotson for me. What do you think?
Yeah, 100% would, like, in a redraft league, I'm trying to sell Dotson for whatever I can. Maybe the way that I would be trying to do it is like, let me package Dotson with something else that's shiny and it looks good enough that I can go and upgrade a piece to someone that's an even better piece. That's the way that I would play it.
Makes sense for sure. And I think we're finished up here, but is anyone else you wanted to?
No, I think that's it. And we came in slightly over 2 hours this week. We're trying to do a tight 2 hours with pipe dreams of a tight 90.
120.
Yeah, someday. But anyway, for everyone that stuck with us here live and you made it all the way to the end, we appreciate you and your viewership. Hope we gave you some alpha that you're able to apply this week in your DFS, your underdog drafting, your season-long leagues. But until next Tuesday, we will see you then. Good luck, everybody.
See you next Tuesday, everyone.